Okay, dismounting and mounting a tire. We're going to go through the process of using the tire machine to dismount and then remount a tire on the wheel. First thing that I want to talk about is safety. A couple safety things when we're using a tire machine. First thing being, we want to have our safety glasses on at all times, or at least a face shield to protect our face. We want some kind of eye protection when we are using our tire machine. We also want to be aware of pinch zones. We want to make sure we are not putting our fingers anywhere where they are going to get pinched by this tire, between the tire and the wheel. The first step is we need to let the air out of the tire. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to remove our valve stem cover, and we're going to go ahead and remove our valve core using a valve core tool. The valve core will unscrew from the valve stem. Now we want to avoid doing exactly what I just did, which is letting the valve core go shooting out of the end of the tire. So we'll have to go ahead and retrieve that. Right, so we have our valve core retrieved. That's something we want to avoid doing. It does happen from time to time though. The next step is to break the bead of the tire from the wheel. Separate the bead of the tire and the wheel. We do that using this part of the tire machine. Again, this is one of those places where we want to make sure our fingers are not getting pinched. If I pull up on this lever, the air cylinder will come in. If I push down on this lever, the air cylinder will go out. So I'm going to place my tire between, and my wheel, between the tire machine and this arm. As we bring this in, we want to try to position it so that it ends up right on the edge of our wheel. We don't want to push on the wheel. We want to go between the tire and the wheel. Keeping our fingers clear, pull up, and you'll hear that pop as it separates the tire from the wheel. It may not separate it all the way around, so we may have to rotate our tire 180 degrees and attempt it again. So this side of our tire is now separated from the wheel. We'll go to the other side and repeat the same process. And rotate our tire 180 degrees and do the same thing again. Again, this tips both ways and will also move in and out. Always be aware of where your fingers are while you're doing this. Okay, that separates our tire from our bead. The next step is to set up our tire on the tire machine. So I'm going to go ahead and place my wheel onto the tire machine. And the pedal that is furthest to the left will engage the jaws around that tire. Now we talked about pinch zones. That is another pinch zone that I need to make sure that I'm aware of. I'm going to go ahead and lift up on this pedal with the bottom of the pedal with the top of my foot, keeping my fingers clear. And you'll hear the jaws will come out and grab onto the wheel. I can now rotate this tire using the pedal furthest to the right. If I push down on the pedal, the tire will rotate clockwise. If I lift up on the pedal, the tire will rotate counterclockwise. I'm going to bring in my arm, and I'm going to adjust my arm so that it makes contact with the wheel. We want this to be right alongside the wheel so that we are able to remove the tire from the wheel. The way we get that adjustment, is by lifting up on this lever. And this allows our arm to move up and down. So we're going to bring our arm down so it rests just on top of the wheel and push the lever back. And then we'll bring it up just enough so it's just slightly above the wheel. We're going to bring our arm in tight to the wheel and adjust our stop. The nice thing about this is if we're doing multiple tires, we only have to go through this part of the process one time. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our tire spoon and we're going to place our tire spoon between the tire and the wheel. And we're going to basically pry the bead of our tire up over the top of the wheel. Now as we do this, the bottom of the tire will need to slide down into the wheel. So sometimes we have to push down on this side of the tire at the same time to allow that to happen. Once our tire is pried up over the top of that bar, we can begin to rotate the tire clockwise in order to remove this bead from the wheel. We're then going to repeat that process for the other side of the bead. We'll lift up on our tire. Now this part can be a little tricky. We need to get our tire spoon, without getting our fingers caught, we need to get our tire spoon between the bottom bead of the tire and the edge of this bar. Lift up and over just like we did with the top. Fingers clear. We're going to go ahead and rotate clockwise. And the tire is off the wheel. We can then put our spoon back, slide our bar out of the way, and we've successfully removed our tire from the wheel. Now, when we get ready to reinstall our tire on the wheel, we want to make sure that we are going the correct direction. Most radial tires today can rotate in either direction. A good way to check this is, number one, look at the sidewall of the tire and see if there are any arrows on the tire. If there's an arrow on the tire, then the tire must rotate in that direction. If there's no arrows on the tire, another indication would be the tread pattern. In this case, if we look, our tread pattern is symmetric, meaning if we look at it from either direction, the tread pattern would be the same. Therefore, this tire can be mounted in either direction. In order to get our tire onto the wheel, one of the things that we need to do is we need to put some lube on our bead. It's basically a soapy solution along with water that we need to use. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of that bead lube on to the bead. And just go all the way around with our brush. And then we'll place that side of the tire over the wheel. Now, we need to put our arm back in between the tire and the wheel. And we want to place our tire so that the tire is basically going up and over our bar. So on the back side, we are over, and on the front side, we are under. So it should look like this when you have the tire positioned properly. We're then going to take our tire and push down on the wheel to try to get the majority of the tire bead down underneath the wheel, underneath the rim. As this tire rotates, in order for the tire to be able to stretch over the wheel, the other side of the tire needs to slide down into the wheel. And we can help to do that with our fingers, but we want to make sure to keep our fingers up on top as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and rotate and allow the bead to work its way down. Repeat this process for the top. We'll add a little bit of bead lube to the top of the tire. Again, same scenario. We want to be up and over. When we refer to up and over, this is what we're referring to. The tire goes up on the back side and down under on the front side of the tire machine, of the arm. So again, keeping a little bit of downward pressure, allowing the tire to slide down into the wheel. We're going to rotate. The tire should stretch itself over the wheel. We're keeping our fingers clear of any pinch zones and allowing the tire to move over the wheel. We're then going to slide this arm out of our way, and we're ready to add air to the tire. Now this particular tire should set on the bead relatively easily. Our air pedal can be found on the back side of the tire machine. Now there's two stages of this air pedal. Light pressure will allow air to mount to this hose and start to fill the tire. Heavier pressure will cause a blast of air to come out of this part of the tire machine, which allows us to seat the bead. In some cases, when we've had a tire sitting on the shelf for a long time, that tire tends to collapse. And when that tire collapses, it can be very hard to get the bead of the tire to form a seal against the wheel. So what we end up doing, I want to show you what that sounds like so you're aware of it if it happens. That's what that blast would sound like. In most cases, we will not need that. We'll go ahead. Again, this is a really critical pinch zone situation. In this case, the pinch zone is the area between the tire and the wheel. We do not want our fingers in that area at any point. So when we go to fill this tire with air, the only place that our hand should be is on this air nozzle, away from any of those pinch zones, and we're going to slowly start to add air. And immediately you see the tire rise up. That means the bead is set. If we heard air escaping, then we would need to use the higher pressure on the pedal to try to get the tire to seat. We're going to add air, and you're going to hear 2 loud pops as the bead seats. Be aware of that. It will startle you if you're not expecting it. There's one, and I believe both of them came at about the same time. Now, if you are doing this and you can't get those 2 pops, we want to be careful not to go over about 20 pounds per square inch during this time. This is actually a pretty volatile time. This is where the tire can come up over the edge of the wheel. If you run into a scenario where you can't get these beads to pop and seat, do not just keep adding pressure. This is where you stop and you get somebody to help you. Now remember, our valve core is still out. We left it out to allow more air to flow into the tire to make it easier to seat our bead. We're going to go ahead and take our hose off, and we'll hear the air comes rushing back out. The reason it's rushing back out is our valve stem our valve core, I should say, is not in place. So we're going to reinstall our valve core. And now we can air up the tire. At this point, what I also like to do is push down on my leftmost pedal and remove the jaws from the wheel. What that allows is the tire to spread out and not have interference from the machine. I'm watching my gauge and allowing the pressure to come up. The pressure that we're going to run in this tire is 35 psi because that's what's recommended by the manufacturer. So we're a little above that 35 psi, so we can let a little air out. And that gets us to right about that 35 psi, recommended by the manufacturer. We'll remove our tire from the tire machine, install our valve cover, and that tire is ready to be balanced, which is the next step in our process.